General Yigal Yardin, 1917 to 1984, the Army's second Chief of Staff and a founding father of Israeli biblical archaeology, was born Yigal Sukenik. He was ordered to change his surname by Ben-Gurion after May 1948. Eliyahu Eilat, 1903 to 1990, an Israeli diplomat and Orientalist and the first Israeli ambassador to the United States, was born Eliyahu Epstein in Russia and immigrated to Palestine in 1924. Yisrael Galilee, 1911-1986, was an Israeli government minister. Before 1948 he had served as Chief of Staff of the Haganah. He was born Israel Burchenko in today's Ukraine. May Yamet, 1921 to 2009, was an Israeli politician and cabinet minister and head of the Mossad from 1963 to 1968. He was born in mandatory Palestine as May Slutsky to several parents from Russia. May Argov, 1905 to 1963, Israeli politician and a signatory of the Israeli Declaration of Independence, was born Meir Grabowski, born in Moldova, then Russian Empire, and changed his name after 1948. Pinhas Rosen, 1887-1978, the first Israeli Minister of Justice and a signatory to the Israeli Declaration of Independence, was born in German as Felix Rosenbluth and changed his name after 1948. Aber Huscher, 1898-1969, an Israeli politician and mayor of Haifa for 18 years, was born Aber Schneller, also Abar Kushi, in Poland and immigrated to Palestine in 1920. Mordechai Bentov, 1900-1985, was a politician and cabinet minister. He was born in the Russian Empire as Mordechai Gutgeld and immigrated to Palestine in 1920. Peretz Bernstein, 1890-1971, was a Zionist leader, Israeli politician and one of the signatories of the Israeli Declaration of Independence in 1948. He was born in Germany as Fritz Bernstein, immigrated to Palestine in 1936 and changed his name after the establishment of Israel. Avram Granot, 1890-1962, Israeli politician, chairman of the JNF Board of Directors and a signatory of the Israeli Declaration of Independence, was born in, today, Moldova as Abraham Granovsky. He immigrated to Palestine in 1924 and changed his name after 1948. Mordechai Bentov, 1900-1985, Israeli journalist and politician, was born Mordechai Gutgeld in Poland and immigrated to Palestine in the mandatory period. Herzl Vardi, 1903-1991, Israeli politician, a signatory of the Israeli Declaration of Independence and editor of the Israeli daily Yediot Aharonot, was born Herzl Rosenblum in Lithuania and changed his name after 1948. Professor Benjamin Mazar, co-founder of Israeli biblical archaeology, was born Benjamin Meisler in Poland and was educated in Germany. He immigrated to colonial Palestine in 1929 and Hebraicized his name. Yitzhak Seder, 1890-1952, commander of the Haganah Strike Force, the Parmer, and one of the key army commanders in 1948, was born in Russia as Isaac Landsberg. General Yitzhak Rabin, the first native-born Israeli prime minister, 1974-1977 and 1992-1995, was born Nehemiah Rubitsov in Jerusalem to a Zionist settler from the Ukraine. General Yigal Allon, 1918-1980, commander of the Parmer in 1948, government minister and acting prime minister of Israel, best known as the architect of the Allen Plan, was born in Palestine as Yigal Paikovich. His grandfather was one of the early East European settlers who immigrated to Palestine in the 1880s. After Israel was proclaimed in 1948, he changed his name to the Hebrew Allen, oak tree. Ephraim Katzir, 1916-2009, the fourth president of Israel from 1973 to 1978, was born Ephraim Kachelski, son of Yehuda and Seeler Kachelski, in Kiev and immigrated to mandatory Palestine in 1925. Aber Eben, 1915-2002, Israeli foreign minister and deputy prime minister, was born Aubrey Solomon May Eben in Cape Town, South Africa, to Lithuanian Jewish parents. In 1947, after immigrating to mandatory Palestine, he changed his first name to Aber, Hebrew, Father Solomon May Eben. General Tzvi Zer, 1923-2004, the Israeli Army's sixth Chief of Staff, was born in the Zaslav in the Soviet Union as Cherchenko. General Chaim Bar-Lev, Army Chief of Staff in 1968 to 1971 and later a government minister, was born Chaim Brodsluski in Vienna in 1924. Ben-Zion Dinor, 1884 to 1973, Israel's Minister of Education and Culture in the 1950s, was born Ben-Zion Dinaberg in the Ukraine and immigrated to Palestine in 1921. General Moshe Ya'alon, former Army Chief of Staff, was born in Israel in 1950 as Moshe Smolenski. Prominent Israeli author and journalist Amos Elon, 1926 to 2009, was born in Vienna as Amos Sternbach. Yisrael Bar Yehuda, 1895 to 1965, was an Israeli labor politician who held a number of ministerial posts. He was born Yisrael Idelson in present-day Ukraine and immigrated to Palestine in 1926. Israel's leading novelist Amos Ents was born in Mandatory Palestine in 1939 as Amos Klausner. His parents, Yehuda Klausner and Fainir Musman, were Zionist immigrants to Mandatory Palestine from Eastern Europe. Gershom Scholem, a German-born Jewish philosopher and historian and the founder of the modern academic study of Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, was born Gerhard Scholem. He changed his name to Gershom Scholem after he emigrated to Mandatory Palestine in 1923. Moshe Kol, 1911-1989, Israeli politician and a signatory of the Israeli Declaration of Independence, was born Moshe Kolodny in Pinsk, Russian Empire, and changed his name after 1948. Avram Nissan was a Zionist political figure in Mandatory Palestine and a signatory to the Israeli Independence Declaration in 1948. He was born Avram Katznelson in 1888 in what is now Belarus and changed his name after 1948. Tzvi Shaloer, 1911-2000, an Israeli Labour Mapai politician, who was one of the founders of the Whole Land of Israel movement after 1967 and served as a member of the Knesset for Tahir in the 1980s, was born Tzvi Langsam in the Ukraine and immigrated to Mandatory Palestine in 1932. Ben-Zion Sternberg, 1894 to 1962, a Zionist activist and a signatory to the Israeli Declaration of Independence, was born Benno Sternberg in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Yigal Chumarkin, a German-born Israeli artist known for his memorial sculpture of the Holocaust in Tel Aviv, was born in Dresden in 1993 as Peter Martin Gregor Heinrich Hallberg. Israel's greatest poet, Yehuda Amichai, 1924 to 2000, Hebrew for Praise My People Alive, was born in Germany as Ludwig Pfeffer. He immigrated to colonial Palestine in 1935 and subsequently joined the Parma and the Haganah. In 1947 he was still known as Yehuda Pfeffer. Amos Keenan, 1927 to 2009, an Israeli columnist and novelist, was born Amos Levine in Tel Aviv in 1927 and changed his family name after 1948. Peretz Bernstein, 1890 to 1971, Israeli politician and one of the signatories of the Israeli Declaration of Independence in May 1948, was born in Germany as Fritz Bernstein and changed his name after 1948. Israeli Jewish communist leader Meir Vilner, 1918 to 2003, who began his political life as one of the leaders of the Zionist left-wing group Hashmer Hatzer and became a signatory to the Israeli Declaration of Independence in May 1948 under the name Meir Vilna Kovner, was born Ber-Kovner in Lithuania and immigrated to Palestine in the late 1930s. Aber Kovner, Meir Vilna Kovner's cousin, was a well-known Israeli Zionist poet born in the Crimean city of Sevastopol. Aber Kovner's mother, Rosa Taubman, changed her name to Rachel Kovner after immigrating to Palestine. Yaakov Zerubbabel, Zionist writer, publisher and one of the leaders of the Pold Zion movement, was born Yaakov Vitkin in the Ukraine. Historian Ben-Zion Netanyahu, a Polish immigrant to the United States, and the father of the current Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Miliakowski Netanyahu, was born in Poland as Ben-Zion, son of Zion Milakowski in 1910. Reuven Aloni, 1919 to 1988, founder of the Israel Land Administration, an Israeli government authority responsible for managing land in Israel which manages 93% of the land in Israel, was born Reuven Rolanitsky. He was also the husband of Shulamit Aloni, born Shulamit Adler. Shulamit Aloni, 1928 to 2014, born Shulamit Adler, was an Israeli politician and leader of the Meretz party and served as education minister from 1992 to 1993. Adler's father descended from a Polish family. Yosef Aaron Almajai, 1910 to 1991, a Labour politician who served as a member of the Knesset between 1955 and 1977 and held several ministerial posts, was born Joseph Karlenbaum in the Russian Empire, today in Poland, and immigrated to Palestine in 1930. David Magan, born David Montenegro in 1945, is a former Israeli politician who held a number of ministerial posts in 1990s. He arrived from Morocco in 1949. Zalman Aron, 1899 to 1970, was an Israeli politician. He was born Zalman Aharonowitz in the Ukraine and arrived in Palestine in 1926. Aaron Barak, President of the Israeli Supreme Court from 1995 to 2006 and the Attorney General of Israel, 1975 to 1978, was born Aaron Brick in Lithuania in 1936. His father, Tzvi Brick, arrived in Palestine in 1947. Yitzhak Modrai, 1926 to 1998, was a politician and Knesset member. He was born Yitzhak Madzovich in Mandatory Palestine. Yehuda A. Mittal, 1924 to 2010, was a Zionist rabbi, cabinet minister and head of Yeshivat Har Etzion in the West Bank, established in 1968. He born Yehuda Klein in Romania and arrived in Palestine in 1944. Eid Barak, born in 1942, is an Israeli politician who served as Prime Minister from 1999 to 2001 and earlier as Chief of Staff of the Army. He was the son of Israel Mendel Brock, 1910 to 2002, born to a family which immigrated from the Russian Empire. Eid Brock Hebrewized his family name from Brock to Barak in 1972. Joseph Tommy Lapid, 1931 to 2008, was born Tomislav Lampel in Serbia. He was an Israeli journalist, politician and government minister. Naomi Chazin, born Naomi Haman in Mandatory Palestine in 1946, is an Israeli academic and politician. She is the daughter of Avram Haman, an Israeli ambassador to the US. Haman was born in London and immigrated to Palestine in 1938. Rachel Cohen Kagan, 1888 to 1982, was an Israeli politician and one of only 2 women to sign the Israeli Declaration of Independence in 1948. She was born Rachel Lubersky in today's Ukraine and immigrated to Palestine in 1919. Yehuda Karman, 1912-1995, professor of geography at the Hebrew University, was born Leopold Kaufman in Poland and moved to Palestine in 1938. Hanok Bartov died in 2016, a prominent Israeli author and journalist who also served as a cultural advisor in the Israeli embassy in London, was born Hanok Helfgott in Palestine in 1926, a year after his parents immigrated from Poland. Evidently, many of these name changes took place around or shortly after 1948. During the mandatory period, it was still advantageous for individuals to have their original European names. The above list also shows senior officers and army chiefs of staffs, Hebrew, Ravelofs, adopting Hebrew-sounding names in the post-1948 period. Ironically, although in the Hebrew Bible the Philistines are constructed as the other and arch-enemy of the Israelites, since 1948 a Philistine term such as Seren, a lord, has been used by the Israeli army as a rank equivalent to captain. Also, the terms Aluf and Ravelof, Major General and Lieutenant General, respectively, which have been used for the 2 highest ranks in the army, are apparently from the New Testament. In the New Testament, Aluf, chief, the one who commands 1,000 people, was a rank of nobility among the Idumites, identified by some scholars to be of Nabatean Arab origins and often depicted as the Israelites, inveterate enemies whom the Hebrew prophets denounced violently. Since 1948, the Israeli state has encouraged a conception of an ethnocentric identity on the basis of the traditions of land and conquest of the Hebrew Bible, especially the Book of Joshua, and those dealing with the biblical Israelites' origins that demanded the subjugation and destruction of other peoples. It is hardly surprising, therefore, that the Book of Joshua is required reading in Israeli schools. In fact, the Book of Joshua is a work of fiction, and the Israelite conquest was not the blitzkrieg it is made out to be in the Book of Joshua. But this book holds an important place in the Israeli school curricula and Israeli academic programs, partly because their founding fathers of Zionism viewed Joshua's narrative of conquest as a precedent for the establishment of Israel as a nation. Verge 2003, 82. Although the account of the Israelites' enslavement in ancient Egypt as described in the Book of Exodus is generally recognized as a myth, in Israeli schools and universities this is treated as actual history. Furthermore, since 1948 Israeli academic institutions have continued the same colonialist tradition of intelligence gathering and data collection. The Israeli Army and Israeli Biblical Academy, in particular, have always been intimately connected to and close partners in nation building. Engagement in nationalist mobilization, using the Bible and myth-making through spurious scholarly activity involves a large number of Israeli academics and social scientists, in particular archaeologists, political geographers and Orientalists. The involvement of Israeli academic institutions with their Governmental Names Committee, below, which has operated since the early 1950s and continues to do so, from the Israeli Prime Minister's office, is perhaps the best example of academic complicity in the production of knowledge through myth-making. Toponyms from above and state-supervised projects. The Israeli Governmental Names Committee post 1948 Zionist projects concentrated on the Hebraicization, Judaization of Palestinian geography and toponymy through the practice of renaming sites, places and events. The Hebraicization project deployed renaming to construct new places and new geographic identities related to supposed biblical places. Their new Hebrew names embodied an ideological drive and political attributes that could be consciously mobilized by the Zionist hegemonic project. The official project began with the appointment of the Governmental Names Committee, V'adat Hashmot Hamims Haltet, by Prime Minister Ben-Gurion in July 1949. Ben-Gurion had visited the Narkab and Negev in June and had been struck by the fact that no Hebrew names existed for geographical sites in the region. The 11th of June 1949 entry for his war diary reads, Eilat, we drove through the open spaces of the Araver, from Ein Husp to Ein Waber. We must give Hebrew names to these places, ancient names, if there are, and if not, new ones. Ben-Gurion 1982, Volume 3, 989. In the immediate post-Nakba period, Israeli archaeologists and members of the Israeli Exploration Society on the Governmental Names Committee concentrated their initial efforts on the creation of a new map for the newly occupied Negev, Arbu El-Hajj 2001, 91-94, commissioned to create Hebrew names for the newly occupied Palestinian landscape. Throughout the documents produced by this committee were reported references to foreign names. The Israeli public was called upon to uproot the foreign and existing names and in their place to master the new Hebrew names. Most existing names were Arabic. Charged with the task of erasing hundreds of Arabic place names and creating Hebrew names in the Negev, the committee held its first meeting on the 18th of July and subsequently met 3 times a month for a 10-month period and assigned Hebrew names to 561 different geographical features in the Negev mountains, valleys, springs and waterholes, using the Bible as a resource. Despite the obliteration of many ancient Arabic names from the Negev landscape, some Arabic names became similar-sounding Hebrew names. For example, Seal Imran became Nahal Amram, apparently recalling the father of Moses and Aaron. The Arabic Jabal Harith, Mount Harith, became Har Harif. Sharp Mountain, Jabal Dibber, Hump Hill, became Har Dialayat, Mount Pumpkin. After rejecting the name Har Gasher, after the people to whom King David's third wife belonged, as a Hebrew appellation for the Arabic Jabal, Ideid, sprawling mountain, the committee decided to call it Har Karkam, Mount Crocus, because crocuses grow in the Negev. 28 However, the sound of the Arabic name, Ideid, was retained for the nearby springs, which are now called Birot Oded, the Wells of Oded, supposedly after the biblical prophet of the same name. In its report of March 1956, the Israeli Government Names Committee stated, in the summarized period 145 names were adopted for antiquity sites, ruins and tells, Arabic for hills or archaeological mounds. 8 names were determined on the basis of historical identification, 16 according to geographical names in the area, 8 according to the meaning of the Arabic words, and the decisive majority of the names, 113, were determined by mimicking the sounds of the Arabic words, a partial or complete mimicking, in order to give the new name a Hebrew character, following the accepted grammatical and vowelling rules, quoted in Arbu El-Hajj 2001, 95-29 in Hidden Histories, Palestinian scholar Bassem Raad 2010, citing a 1988 study, to Parlement Palestinian, Plain de Saint-Jean d'Acre et Corridor de Jerusalem, by Thomas Thompson, Francolino Gonçalves and J. M. Van Kang, shows that the Israeli Parlement committees went far beyond their original mandates. There was simply not enough of biblical tradition to go by, so the project could only continue by picking out biblical or Jewish associations at random. It had to Hebrewize Arabic names, or in other cases translate Arabic to Hebrew to give the location an ideologically consistent identity. For example, some locations were rendered from Arabic into the Hebrew phonetic system. Minay el-Musarifer became Horvad Mishrafat Yam and Kirbet el-Musharifer was changed to Horvad Marsref. Sometimes, in this artificial process, the committees forgot about certain genuine Jewish traditions, as in the case of the total cancelling of the Arabic name Kirbet Hanuter, not recognizing that it probably rendered the Talmudic connoter. This forced exercise of renaming often even went against biblical tradition, most notably in erasing the Arabic names Yarlu and Imruz after 1967. Yarlu became Ayalan, while Imruz, Weston Emors, associated with the Christ story, was one of the 3 villages, along with Beit Nuber, raised in 1967. The old stones from the villages were sold to Jewish contractors to lend local tradition and age to new buildings elsewhere, and the whole area was turned into the tragic Canada Park, made possible by millions from a Canadian donor. Raad 2010, 188-189, Thompson et al. 1988, The Legendary Toponymy of Zionist Settlers and the Latin Medieval Crusaders. Israeli renaming committees followed the methods of Christian scriptural geographers and biblical archaeologists of the 19th century such as Victor Guerin and Edward Robinson who, like the Latin medieval Crusader pilgrims in Maurice Halbwach's La Topographie légendaire des Évangiles et Saint, Études de Mémoire Collective, 1941, discovered, produced and reproduced particular place names from the myth narratives of the Bible, Talmud and Mishnah. Toponymicide, mimicry and Arabization, appropriating Palestinian heritage, erasing the Palestinian past. The Palestinians share common experiences with other indigenous peoples who had their self-determination and narrative denied, their material culture destroyed and their histories erased, retold, reinvented or distorted by European white settlers and colonizers. In The Invasion of America, 1975, Francis Jennings highlighted the hegemonic narratives of the European white settlers by pointing out that for generations historians wrote about the indigenous peoples of America from an attitude of cultural superiority that erased or distorted the actual history of the indigenous peoples and their relations with the European settlers. In Decolonizing Methodologies, Research and Indigenous Peoples, Maori scholar Linda Tuhiwai Smith argues that the impact of European settler colonization is continuing to hurt and destroy indigenous peoples, that the negation of indigenous views of history played a crucial role in asserting colonial ideology, partly because indigenous views were regarded as incorrect or primitive, but primarily because they challenged and resisted the mission of colonization. Smith, L. 1999, 29. She states, under colonialism indigenous peoples have struggled against a Western view of history and yet been complicit with the view. We have often allowed our histories to be told and have then become outsiders as we heard them being retold. Maps of the world reinforced our place on the periphery of the world, although we were still considered part of the empire. This included having to learn new names for our lands. Other symbols of our loyalty, such as the flag, were also an integral part of the imperial curriculum. Our orientation to the world was already being redefined as we were being excluded systematically from the writing of the history of our own lands. Smith, L. 1999, 33. Although continuing some of the pre-Nakba patterns, Zionist toponymic strategies in the post-Nakba period pursued more drastic memoricide and erasure and the detachment of the Palestinians from their history, with the physical destruction of hundreds of Palestinian villages and towns during and after 1948. the Israeli state now focused on the erasure of indigenous Palestinian toponymic memory from history and geography. The physical disappearance of Palestine in 1948, the deletion of the demographic and political realities of historic Palestine, and the erasure of Palestinians from history centered on certain key issues, the most important of which is the contest between a denial and an affirmation, said 1980. Arbulakad et al. 1991. The deletion of historic Palestine from maps and cartography was not only designed to strengthen the newly created state, but also to consolidate the myth of their unbroken link between the days of their biblical Israelites and the modern Israeli state. Commenting on the systematic silencing of the Palestinian past, historian Elon Papp, in The Ethnic Cleaning of Palestine, deploys the doctrine of cultural memorizide, where he highlights the systematic scholarly, political and military attempt in post-1948 Israel to de-Arabize the Palestinian terrain, its names, spaces, religious sites, its villages, towns and cityscapes, and its cemeteries, fields, and olive and orange groves, and the fruit called saber, cactus, the prickly pears famously grown in and around Arab villages and cultivated in Arab gardens in Palestine. Papp conceives of a metaphorical palimpsest at work here, the erasure of the history of one people in order to write that of another people over it, the reduction of many layers to a single layer, Papp 2006, 225-234. In the post-Nakba period, some of the features of the Israeli renaming strategy closely followed pre-1948 practices of appropriation of Palestinian Arabic toponyms and mimicry. The historic Arabic names of geographical sites were replaced by evoked biblical or Talmudic names and newly coined Hebrew names, some of which vaguely resembled biblical names. It has already been shown that the replacement of Arabic places and the renaming of Palestine's geographical sites followed roughly the guidelines suggested in the 19th century by Edward Robinson, 1841, Robinson et al. 1860. The obsession with biblical archaeology and scriptural geography transformed Palestinian Arabic place names, Palestinian geographical sites and the Palestinian landscape into subjects of Zionist mimicry and camouflaging. Jacobi 2009, 115. From the 19th century and throughout the first half of the 20th century, Western colonialist imagination, biblical landscape painting, fantasy and exotic travel accounts, Orientalist biblical scholarship, Holy Land archaeology, cartography and scriptural geography have been critical to the success of the Western colonial enterprise in the Middle East, recreating their Bible lands, reinventing a historical primordial Hebrew ethnicity, while at the same time silencing Palestinian history and de-Arabizing Palestinian toponymy. Masalha 2007, Whitelam 1996, Long 1997, 2003. Israel's biblical industry, with its Hebrew renaming projects, was embedded in this richly endowed and massively financed colonial tradition. Israeli historian Elon Papp remarks, in 1948 to 1949 the land changed beyond recognition. The countryside, the rural heart of Palestine, with its colorful and picturesque villages, was ruined. Half the villages had been destroyed, flattened by Israeli bulldozers which had been at work since August 1948, when the government had decided to either turn them into cultivated land or to build new Jewish settlements on their remains. A naming committee granted the new settlements Hebraized Isic versions of the original Arab names. Lubia became Lavi, and Safuria, Isafaria, Zippori, Itzipori. David Ben-Gurion explained that this was done as part of an attempt to prevent future claim to the villages. It was also supported by the Israeli archaeologists, who had authorized the names as returning the map to something resembling ancient Israel. Papp 2004, 138-139, Jewish settlements were established on the land of the depopulated and destroyed Palestinian villages. In many cases, these settlements took the names of the original Palestinian villages and distorted them into Hebrew-sounding names. This massive appropriation of Palestinian heritage provided support for the European Jewish colonizers' claim to represent an indigenous people returning to its homeland after 2,000 years of exile. For instance, the Jewish settlement that replaced the large and wealthy village of Beit Dagan, the Philistine House of Dagan, with 5,000 inhabitants in 1948, was named Beit Dagan. Founded in 1948, Kibbutz Sasa was built on Sasa village, the cooperative Moshav of Ankar on the land of Ankar village, Warkim 2001a, 2001b, Bokhari 2005, 73. Ol Karbri in the Galilee was renamed Karbri, Ol Basar village was renamed Batsat, Ol Mujadil village, near Nazareth, was renamed Migdal Hemek, Tower of the Valley. In the region of Tiberias alone there were 27 Arab villages in the pre-1948 period, 25 of them, including Dalhamir, Arbu Shusha, Kafr Sabt, Lubia, Ol Shajara, Ol Majdal and Hittin, were destroyed by Israel. The name Hittin, where Saladin, in Arabic, Salah ul-Din, famously defeated the Latin Crusaders in the Battle of Hattin in 1187, leading to the siege and defeat of the Crusaders who controlled Jerusalem, was changed to the Hebrew-sounding Kfar Hittim, village of wheat. In 2008 the Israel Land Authority, which controls Palestinian refugee property, gave some of the village's land to a new development project, a $150 million private golf resort, which was to have an 18-hole championship golf course, designed by the American Robert Trent Jones Jr. nearby. The road to Tiberias was named the Munachim Begin Boulevard, heavy iron bars were placed over the entrance to Hitting's ruined mosque, and the staircase leading to its minaret was blocked. Levi 2004. In Marj ibn Amer, the Jezreel Valley, Kibbutz Ein Dor, Dor Spring, was founded in 1948 by members of the Socialist Zionist Hashomer Hatzair, later Mapan, youth movement and settlers from Hungary and the United States. It was founded on the land of the depopulated and destroyed village of Inder, located 10 kilometers southeast of Nazareth. Whether or not the Arabic name preserved the ancient Inder, a Canaanite city, is not clear. After 1948, many of the inhabitants became internal refugees in Israel, present absentees, according to Israeli law, and acquired Israeli citizenship, but were not allowed to return to Inder. In accordance with the common Zionist practice of bestowing biblical names on modern sites and communities, the atheist settlers of Hashomer Hatzair appropriated the Arabic name, claiming that Ein Dor was named after a village mentioned in Samuel 28:319. However, it is by no means certain that the kibbutz's location is anywhere near to where their biblical village stood. An archaeological museum at the kibbutz contains prehistoric findings from the area. In the center of the country, the once thriving ancient Palestinian town of Beit Jibrin, 20 kilometers northwest of the city of Okolol, was destroyed by the Israeli army in 1948. The city's Aramaic name was Beth Garbra, which translates as their house of a strong men. In Arabic, Bir Jibrin also means a house of the powerful, possibly reflecting its original Aramaic name. The Hebrew-sounding kibbutz of Beit Guvrin, house of men, named after a Talmudic tradition, was established on Beit Jibrin's lands in 1949 by soldiers who left the Parmar and Israeli army. Today, Byzantine and Crusader remains survive and are protected as an archaeological site under the Hebrew name of Beit Guvrin. The Arab Islamic heritage of the site is completely ignored. Examples of appropriation of Arabic toponyms and mimicry. The influence of Palestinian Arabic toponyms on the Israeli toponyms are clear in loan Arabic place names, translations of Arabic place names and morphological patterns of renaming. Table 10.1 shows new Hebrew-sounding toponyms based on, derived from or modeled on the Arabic toponyms of Palestinian villages depopulated and destroyed before or in 1948. Table 10.1 Examples of appropriation of Arabic toponyms. Palestinian villages and place names depopulated before or in 1948. Israeli settlements with toponyms derived from the names of destroyed Palestinian villages. Lubia, depopulated July 1948. Arabic, Bin Alavi, kibbutz, founded 1948. Hebrew, Lion Ol Karbri, in Western Galilee, depopulated on the 21st of May 1948. Karbri, kibbutz, founded in 1949. Almer, in the Sadat district, depopulated on the 30th October 1948. Almer, Morshav, founded in 1949. Beria, depopulated on the 2nd of May 1948. Beria, Morshav, founded in 1971. Ankar, in the Acre area, depopulated in October 1948. Ankar, Morshav, founded in 1949. Sajara, Lower Galilee, depopulated July 1948. Arabic, Tree Ain Zayton, Western Galilee, depopulated. Arabic, Spring of Olives. Ilanir, Hebrew, Tree Ein Zeitem, Kibbutz, Hebrew, Spring of Olives, originally founded in 1891 north of the Arab village Ein Zeitem, abandoned during the First World War. 6 Muslims and 1 Jew were recorded there in 1931, living in 4 houses. The Jewish settlement was re-established in 1946. Palestinian villages and place names depopulated before or in 1948. Israeli settlements with toponyms derived from the names of destroyed Palestinian villages. Inder, Marj ibn Amer, depopulated in 1948. Arabic toponym possibly preserves Canaanite. Site, Ender Fulay, depopulated 1925. Arabic, Faverbin Tal Ol, Aders, Arabic, Lentils Hill Ein Dor, Kibbutz, founded 1948. Hebrew, Dor Spring Afular, town, founded in 1925. Tel Aders Him, Morshaf, established in 1923. Hebrew, Lentils Hill Mujadil, village, depopulated in July 1948. Migdal Harimek, town, founded in 1952. Hebrew, Tower of the Valley Ein Hord, depopulated in 1948. Arabic, Spring Basin. Einhad, Artists' Colony, founded in 1953. Hebrew, Spring of Glory 1 Eshwer, or Ishwer, depopulated in July 1948. Eshtaol, Morshaf, founded December 1949. Akir, depopulated on the 6th of May 1948. Kiryat, Ekron, town, founded in 1948. Ein Karim, or Ein Karim, west of Jerusalem, depopulated in 1948. Generous Spring Ein Karim, Jewish neighborhood in West Jerusalem. Hebrew, Vine Spring Kafirbirim, Northern Galilee, depopulated in October 1948. Arabic, Budding Village, Barm. Kibbutz, established in June 1949. Hebrew, Son of the People, Malul, depopulated in the 1920s. Nalal, Morshaf, founded in 1921. Jipter, depopulated in the 1920s. Glat, Kibbutz, founded in 1926. Ulbaser, Western Galilee, depopulated on the 14th May 1948. Batsat, Nature Reserve, renamed after 1948. Wadi ul-Harwarith, Arabic, Valley of Plowing Emek Hefer, Hebrew, Valley of Digging Ein Har Horesh, Kibbutz, founded in 1931, was one of the first Zionist settlements in the northern part of Wadi ul-Harwarith. Hebrew, the Plowman Spring. Notable residents included Israeli historian Benny Morris. Wadi Surah or Wadi Surah, west of Jerusalem. Arabic, Pebble Stream, Nahal Sork Nature Reserve, created in 1965. Hebrew, stream of fruitless tree, derived from the Arabic toponym made to sound like a name from the Midrash, the body of exegesis of the Torah. Seal, Amran, Narkab, Arabic, stream of Amran. Nahal Amram, Hebrew, stream of Amram, recalling the biblical name of the father of Moses and Aaron. Jabal Harif, Narkab, Arabic, Mount Harif Har Harif, Hebrew, Sharp Mountain. Jabal Dibber, Narkab, Arabic, Hump Hill Har Dlayat, Hebrew, Mount Pumpkin. Palestinian villages and place names depopulated before or in 1948. Israeli settlements with toponyms derived from the names of destroyed Palestinian villages. Tol as-Safi, northwest of Okolal, depopulated in July 1948. Arabic, the White Hill. Tel Zarfat National Park. Beit Dagan, southeast of Jaffa, depopulated in April 1948. Beit Dagan, founded in 1948. Hebrew, House of Grain. Sasa, Upper Galilee, depopulated October 1948. Sasser, Kibbutz, founded in January 1949. Hittin, Eastern Galilee, depopulated in July 1948. Kfar Hittim, Morshaf, established in 1936. Hebrew, village of wheat, Ol-Kardra, or Olkdera, Central Palestine. Arabic, Green Hadira, established in 1891 as a farming Zionist colony, today a major Israeli city. Israeli toponym makes no sense in Hebrew. Myron or Mayron, 5 kilometers west of Safed, depopulated in 1948. The name is associated with the ancient Canaanite city of Merom or Meromer Meron. Morshaf, founded in 1949. Al-Majdal, a coastal town in the south, depopulated between November and June 1950. Israeli city, renamed to the Hebrew-sounding Migdal, Ad in 1949 and subsequently to the biblical-sounding Ashkelon. Arabic, Ascalon, Greek, Ascalon Zurin, village in Marj ibn Amer, Jezreel Valley, depopulated in the summer of 1948. Arabic, Sowing Mizra, Kibbutz, in the Jezreel Valley, founded in 1923. Hebrew, sewing. Mizrah hosted the Parmer headquarters until 1946. Israel, kibbutz, established in August 1948 to the west of the remains of the depopulated Syrian Yezer town, 6 kilometers east of Jaffa, depopulated in spring 1948 as a settlement. The historic Palestinian Muslim mosque shrine was turned into a Jewish synagogue and renamed Sha'ar Tzion, Gates of Zion, 56 years after the Nakba. In March 2004, Israeli journalist Gideon Levi wrote, "The Zionist collective memory exists in both our cultural and physical landscape, yet the heavy price paid by the Palestinians in lives, in the destruction of hundreds of villages, and in the continuing plight of the Palestinian refugees, receives little public recognition." Levi 2004. Levi adds, "Look at this prickly pear plant. It's covering a mound of stones. This mound of stones was once a house, or a shed, or a sheep pen, or a school, or a stone fence. Once until 56 years ago, a generation and a half ago, not that long ago, the cactus separated the houses and one lot from another, a living fence that is now also the only monument to the life that once was here. Take a look at the grove of pines around the prickly pear as well. Beneath it there was once a village. All of its 405 houses were destroyed in one day in 1948 and its 2,350 inhabitants scattered all over. No one ever told us about this. The pines were planted right afterward by the Jewish National Fund, JNF, to which we contributed in our childhood, every Friday, in order to cover the ruins, to cover the possibility of return and maybe also a little of the shame and the guilt." Levi 2004. A monumental 1992 study by a team of Palestinian field researchers and academics under the direction of Palestinian historian Walid Khalidi details the destruction of hundreds of villages falling inside the 1949 armistice lines. The study gives the circumstances of each village's occupation and depopulation, and a description of what remains. Khalidi's team visited all, except 14 sites, made comprehensive reports and took photographs. Of the 418 depopulated villages documented by Walid Khalidi, 1992, 293, 70%, were totally destroyed and 22%, were largely destroyed. 7 survived, including Ain Karim, west of Jerusalem, but were taken over by Israeli settlers. A few of the quaint Arab villages and neighborhoods have actually been largely preserved and gentrified, but they are empty of Palestinians. Some of the former residents are internal refugees in Israel and are designated as Jewish artistic colonies. Benvenisti 1986, 25, Masalha 2005, 2012. While an observant traveler can still see some evidence of the destroyed Palestinian villages, in the main, all that is left is a scattering of stones and rubble. But the new state also appropriated for itself both immovable assets, including urban residential quarters, transport infrastructure, police stations, railways, schools, libraries, churches and mosques, as well as books, archival and photo collections, and personal possessions, including silver, furniture, pictures and carpets. Khalidi, W. 1992. In many of the JNF sites, PAP, who analyzes several sites mentioned by the JNF website, including the Jerusalem forest, observes, bustaans, the fruit gardens Palestinian farmers would plant around their farmhouses, appear as one of many mysteries the JNF promises the adventurous visitor. These clearly visible remnants of Palestinian villages are referred to as an inherent part of nature and her wonderful secrets. At one of the sites, it actually refers to the terraces you can find almost everywhere there as the proud creation of the JNF. Some of these were in fact rebuilt over the original ones and go back centuries before the Zionist takeover. Thus, Palestinian bustaans are attributed to nature and Palestine's history transported back to a biblical and Talmudic past. Such is the fate of one of the best-known villages, Ain al-Zitan, which was emptied in May 1948, during which many of its inhabitants were massacred. PAP 2006, 230. In 1948, Ain Zaytan was an entirely Muslim farming community of 1,000, cultivating olives, grain and fruit, especially grapes. The village name was the Arabic for spring of olives. In 1992, Palestinian historian Walid Khalidi described the site as follows: the rubble of destroyed stone houses is scattered throughout the site, which is otherwise overgrown with olive trees and cactuses, cacti. A few deserted houses remain, some with round arched entrances and tall windows with various arch designs. In one of the remaining houses, the smooth stone above the entrance arch is inscribed with Arabic calligraphy, a fixture of Palestinian architecture. The well and the village spring also remain. Khalidi, W. 1992, for 37. Today the old stone mosque, parts of which are still standing, is not mentioned by the JNF website. In 2004, the mosque was turned into a milk farm. The Jewish owner removed the stone that indicated the founding date of the mosque and covered the walls with Hebrew graffiti. PAP 2006, 217. Other mosques belonging to destroyed villages were turned into restaurants. In the case of the Palestinian town Al-Majdal, historic Ascalon, and the Palestinian village of Caesarea, historic Caesarea Palestina, currently the archaeological Roman Crusader theme park of Caesarea, which is part of the Israeli settler-colonial heritage industry. A shop in the case of Beersheba, part of a tourist resort in the case of Al-Zeeb, a bar restaurant called Bonanza, and a tourist site in the case of Ain Horde. PAP 2006, 217. Khalidi, W. 1992, 151. In eastern Galilee, Lavi, near Tiberias, a religious kibbutz founded in 1949 on the fertile lands of the Palestinian village of Lubia, depopulated during 1948 by the Haganah forces, is another example of the appropriation of Palestinian place names by Israel. Anyone can tell that the source of the Hebraicized name Lavi is the Palestinian village Lubia. The Zionists, however, claimed that Lavi comes from the ancient Jewish village that existed in the days of the Mishnah and Talmud. Yet the appropriation of the Palestinian toponym and choice of the new Hebrew name Lavi, lion, rather than Levi, the ancient Jewish last name, and a Levite member of the priesthood reflected the self-identity construction of the European Jewish colonists, their new Jews, and Zionism's new relationship to nature, political geography and tough masculinity. Masalha 2006, 38. Moreover, at Lubia the JNF put up a sign, South Africa Forest, parking, in memory of Hans Riesenfeld, Rhodesia, Zimbabwe. The South Africa Forest and the Rhodesia parking area were created atop the ruins of Lubia, of whose existence not a trace was left. Commenting on the gentrification of several former Palestinian villages, like Ain Karim, and neighborhoods, like those of Lidder and Safford, and their transformation into Jewish-built environments, Israeli architect Chaim Jacobi, of Ben Gurion University, writes, "The Palestinian landscape is a subject of mimicry through which a symbolic indigenization of the Zionist settlers takes place. As in other ethnocentric national projects, such mimicry may be described as an obsession with archaeology, which makes use of historical remains to prove a sense of belonging. The obsession with archaeology and history, as well as with treating them as undisputable truths, is clearly evident in the texts that accompanied the design and construction of the gentrified Arab villages and neighborhoods. In this process, the indigenous landscape is uprooted from its political and historical context, redefined as local and replanted through a double act of mimicry into their build-your-own-home sites." Jacobi 2009, 115. The creation of a usable past, the power-knowledge nexus. The creation of political facts on the ground, together with the instrumentalization of cultural heritage, is key to all modern settler-colonial projects. The treatment of the cultural heritage of Palestine as a tool for Zionist settler purposes is central to Israeli educational policies, the Israeli Biblical Academy, and the Israeli government's renaming projects. The creation of a usable past, Pella Delanan 2012, by the Israeli educational system and the Israeli Biblical Academy has been examined by several Israeli academics and authors, including Nuit Pella Delanan, 2012, 1247, Benjamin Beit Halami, 1992, Shlomo Sand, 2011, Meron Benvenisti, 2002, and Gabriel Pitterberg, 2001, 2008. In Original Sins, Reflections on the History of Zionism and Israel, Beit Halami, of Haifa University, comments on Israel's biblical knowledge. Most Israelis today as a result of Israeli education, regard the Bible as a reliable source of historical information of a secular, political kind. The Zionist version of Jewish history accepts most biblical legends about the beginning of Jewish history, minus divine intervention. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are treated as historical figures. The descent into Egypt and the Exodus are phases in the secular history of a developing people, as is the conquest of Canaan by Joshua. The biblical order of events is accepted, but the interpretation is nationalist and secular. The historicization of the Bible is a national enterprise in Israel, carried out by hundreds of scholars at all universities. The starting point is biblical chronology, then evidence, limited, and speculation, plentiful, are arranged accordingly. The Israeli Defense Ministry has even published a complete chronology of biblical events, giving exact dates for the creation of the world. Claiming this ancient mythology as history is an essential part of Zionist secular nationalism in its attempt to present a coherent account of the genesis of the Jewish people in ancient West Asia. It provides a focus of identification to counter the rabbinical diaspora traditions. Teaching the Bible as history to Israeli children creates the notion of continuity. It is Abraham, the first Zionist, migrating to Palestine, Joshua and the conquest of Palestine, wiping out the Canaanites, just like today, King David's conquest of Jerusalem, just like today. Beit Hallahmi 1992, 119, reflecting on the tight state control and supervision of the history of Palestine, and a biblical knowledge in the Israeli educational system. Shlomo Sand of Tel Aviv University further explains, the teachings of the Bible, used more as a book of national history than sacred religious canons, also became a separate subject in primary and secondary education in the eyes of the first immigrant Ipri. 1948 Yishuv community in Palestine. Each student in every level of the Hebrew school system studies the history of their collective past separately from universal history. It was logical that the development of the collective memory was completed by an adequate university education. Their 3,000 years of Jewish nation had the right to a separate field of pedagogy and research prohibited to unaccredited historians who would presume to access it. One of the most striking results of this original approach was that from the 1930s to the 1990s, no teacher or researcher from the various departments of the history of the Jewish people in Israeli universities considered him or herself to be a non-Zionist historian. Historians of general history whose Zionist identity was not always as confirmed had the freedom to treat questions dealing with Jewish history, but they were ineligible for budgets, scholarships, research institutes, chairs or directing doctoral theses relate to Jewish history. Sand 2011, 159-160, commenting on the production, propagation and dissemination of biblical geographical and archaeological knowledge of the country, Meron Benvenisti, Israeli author and former deputy mayor of Jerusalem, from 1971 to 1978, explained that in the state school curriculum and in the army the subject of a knowledge of the land of the Bible, Yediat Haaretz, is obsessional. Furthermore, knowledge of the land is both militarized and masculinized. This obsessive state-directed search for rootedness in the land by Israeli academia and often Western-funded Zionist research centers, and the treatment of the Bible as actual history, is conducted by predominantly secular Ashkenazi historians, nationalist archaeologists, and biblical academics. Benvenisti writes, the Bible became a guidebook, taught by reference to the landscape, less for its humanistic and social message and not for its divine authorship. There is nothing more romantic and at the same time more establishment than to be connected in some fashion with this cult. Its priests are the madrachim, guides and youth leaders. An extensive institutional network sustained Yediat Haaretz, a knowledge of the biblical country, research institutes, field schools, the Society for the Preservation of Nature in Israel, SPNI, the Jewish National Fund, youth movements, paramilitary units, the army. Benvenisti 1986, 20, also 2002. In Zionism, the selective reconstruction of antiquity and manufactured biblical memory was part of the historical mission of reviving the ancient national roots and spirit. Selective antiquity became both a source of legitimacy and an object of admiration. Zerubbabel 1995, 25. The American-Israeli academic Selwyn Elon Troen of Brandeis University and Ben Gurion University, under the subheading Reclaiming by Naming, remarks on the continuity of European Zionist colonization of Palestine and 19th century, early 20th century Western Christian archaeological excavations and knowledge production. Zionism also set out to reimagine and reconstitute the country's landscape. The process actually began with Christian explorers and archaeologists and Bible scholars from Europe and the United States who visited Palestine from the mid-19th century when the country was under Turkish rule. Contemporary Arab names were but adaptations or corruptions of ancient designations found in sacred texts or other historical sources. Zionist settlers continued the process, although for them it was not merely to recapture the Holy Land of Scriptures. Rather, it was a deeply personal attempt to reimagine themselves in the land of their ancestors. As a consequence, in renaming the land they consciously ignored or set aside many of the physical markers as well as the social and cultural ones of both Europe and the Arab neighbors. Zionists celebrated the return to history of biblical Rehoboth 30 and Ashkelon, Ascalon. In addition, thousands of names were given to streets, public squares and the landscape, with signs in Hebrew everywhere. The total effect invited observers to appreciate that the settlements were the concrete manifestation of national revival by a people who could legitimately claim to be returning natives. Troen 2008, 197.